skin the knee kind of a deal, and then you don't put a Band-Aid on it, the next day you sort of bend that knee and it just cracks and hurts. If you were to wear a Band-Aid, what happens? If you soften, the skin can expand and contract. It's the same thing with the loaf of bread. As you put it in the oven, it wants to expand. That additional moisture will sort of help it. So steam is really the key. Yeah? Shine and oven spray. So this is a fun thing you can do at home too. Right? If you make the bagels the night before, get up in the morning, boil them real quick, and you'll have nice, happy bagels and happy customers or family members.
What's the ratio on whether, like, how much water do you do the honey, or is it just kind of...
It's in your formula. It's on the bottom on there. I can tell you right now, I just pour a little bit and think I went with it. But all you want to do is make it look a little dirty.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing that I'm going to ask you too is keep an eye on the water level. You want to make sure that you got at least about an inch and a half of water there. As it evaporates, it's going to concentrate the sugar solution, and we just want to sort of top it off with some water. Just give it some time to boil again. You want to make sure it's constantly boiling. What does honey do? What do you guys think?
Sweeter, but I think it helps add color.
I think it'll be a little bit of both. So just taste that real quick. So you'll detect slight honey flavor on the bagel, which to me I think is an attractive kind of flavor profile for a bagel. You can use malt. You can use maple sugar. You want to use some type of sugar. Traditionally, they would use malt. Some commercial applications will actually use corn syrup. I'm not a big fan of corn syrup these days. So now that we've got this all set, we can take the ones that are slightly tacky and just place them right back onto the tray that we already had. If you were to dip them in a seed, what I would do is, just so we don't make a big mess or too much of a craziness, just sprinkle the seed at this point. If you guys want to touch this real quick so you can get a sense of what that feels like. Very gelatinous, right? Bounces good, feels good, right? Feels like it's going to do something, hopefully. I prefer baking them in a convection oven. I prefer baking them at about 410 degrees in a convection oven. If I were to go into a deck oven, I'd increase that temperature about 30 to 50 degrees. So I'd probably go 450. The problem with the deck oven is the bottom gets fairly dark very quickly, so it almost looks like it's burnt on the bottom.
Can you double pan them?
You can, absolutely. You want to halfway bake it and then double pan it, because the initial, sort of like searing meat. You know, you want to seal off that bottom so that the top, they'll sort of lift up. If you double pan it, it doesn't get quick enough heat to the bottom, and then you don't get full low flying, especially when you're baking breads on a stone. So that's pretty much it. We take them from here. I'm going to just rush these things over here real quick. They sort of feel like rice rolls or something like that. So it's very gelatinous at this point. Take one over to the oven. And then what we're going to do is, we have to give it the time in the oven is going to be a little dependent. I would recommend as a starting point 12 to 14 minutes bake time. Do you have timers yourselves that you can maybe set on it? So if we can keep it within 12 to 14 minutes, we know that we're constantly baking at the same time, so our control factor is fairly stable. I don't need you to time how long you're boiling it, but just keep an eye on that situation. Add a little bit more water, and then we're ready to rock and roll. Bring it onto the oven. I'll show you over here. And you do not have to wait till a tray is finished baking. Just pop one in after another. Just make sure you keep time on yours. And I do recommend rotate about halfway through 180 degrees. Yeah?
Yeah.
And the worst spot in the oven is right in this dead zone right here. You want to try to avoid that one. I always skip one and then just sort of skip every other one as you're loading. Yeah? That's good. Once you're done, I'll call you over just so we can look at it real quick. We'll just slide them onto here. We'll let them cool, and then we're going to go into a quick review. All right? Questions, concerns, issues, problems? So I'd like you to work in teams of twos. You can pick what the teams are. You pick which bagel you want to do. Just make sure that you don't double up on the same type of bagel. Yeah. All right, go for it.
So you might go get a bagel and I'll see.
Um,
So yeah.
want to go with the vegan or a sour? Sour. Yeah. Alright, we got sour.
Yes. Absolutely. I'll take the bag for you.
Okay, we have the other one over here.
So you got which one?
Sour.
Sour.
We did wheat.
You did whole wheat?
We're
Excellent.
boiling them up, yeah.
So far, so did you want 2 spoons maybe? Are you good with it? Just don't stick your hand in there. If
See
you
what
see
happens.
that one that's,
That one that's
sunk,
sink, yeah.
So if you notice that a majority of them sink, my recommendation is put them in right side up first. Because if
Okay.
you get them stuck to the bottom of the pan, what can sometimes happen is that it sort of damages the top surface.
Okay.
Yeah? But if it's just for a quick minute that it's sort of, I mean a second or so, it sinks, you'll be fine.
No. Maybe.
Yeah, I usually turn them inside out. Okay, if you give it to me, I can take it from here.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember the history of the bagel? It's okay, it's okay. It wasn't part of the assessment tool. If I didn't tell you, I'm going to tell you now. What does it look like? I don't think you'll guess. Let's see if we can come up with a good, what's that, a ring? Almost. It's definitely a ring-ish kind of a shape. What's that? A wheel, sort of. It has to do with, in Poland, in relation to a field marshal, they wanted to pay homage to his battles, and they replicated the stirrup of his saddle with this thread.
Oh.
Okay.
Makes sense, right? I mean, you'd like to put your feet through that too.
Flip them this time.
They're so nice and quiet, I love it. Do they look different for you guys when you're looking at them or not at this point? Do they all look the same?
I mean,
Ours are whole wheat.
theirs are
so-
noticeably different.
Ours
They're
are-
noticeably
So I'm
different,
trying
right?
to look at these two. right
Why do you
here.
think that's maybe noticeably different?
Because they have the whole wheat, so they have a darker flour.
Okay. What does darker flour do? We talked about it a little bit, well, last week, 3 weeks ago, in regards to what whole wheat flour needs more of potentially.
Hydration.
Higher hydration, right? So the reason why theirs is more defined, any idea why?
Condensed.
That's it, right there. What do you say?
More condensed.
They're more dense, right? So they're firmer, hence it can withstand the shape a whole lot better. So if you want to look at a bagel that looks really pretty and has some good definition, the lower the hydration, the prettier the bagel's going to be. You'll see that when we get to the other bagels, I think you're going to notice a noticeable change visually, texturally, as well. Flavor won't notice the later.
How do you feel compared
All right, so what I'd like to do is let's open the page back to, I think it's right after the cover page, or what do you get, after the PowerPoint presentation that you guys have in there. And I just want to sort of reflect back a little bit in regards to what we did in the 30-minute, then quickly go through the 45, and then sort of just talk about what happened today, and then we're going to taste. Yeah. This will also give the bread a little opportunity to cool, because when you want to taste things, they should be at least room temperature. They're a little too warm; it really starts to affect the flavor subtleties. So do you guys remember the little demos that we had going on during that first class? I know it's a long time ago, and I know you look at the blog all the time to sort of review it.
With the bottles with the different.
Yes, okay, so we
Flour.
have bottles, right? And we tried to sort of captivate or showcase what with those bottles. Do you guys remember? Do you remember what the control factors were in those bottles?
Just think like salt, yeast, water.
Salt, yeast, water, and did we put sugar in there?
Well, we
Did
put
Flour.
the
We did not use malt.
No,
we
we
used
used-
malt in a bagel. So let me give you the control factor component again. We used water for sure. We used flour, and then we inoculated that with yeast. And then we had a reaction, and I'm sure in your notes you could probably backtrack it since I could see you all wrote that. Which was the fastest moving one? Was it the flour, water, salt, and yeast? Was it the water and yeast? Or was it the flour, water, and yeast?
Flour, water, yeast.
Flour, water, yeast. Now let's see if we can identify why that was the case.
No salt.
No salt, right? Salt does what?
Slows down.
Slows down, controls fermentation, right? So that the yeast doesn't run away and consume what? What is the yeast trying to consume?
Sugar.
Sugar, as it consumes the sugars, right? And then when you start baking with it, what's going to happen too? Maybe, let's just think real quick. As we lose sugars, what's going to happen?
Tightens gluten.
It's going to tighten gluten on the mixing end of it. That's next week. We're going to still focus on the first part. So salt, as it consumes, like if the yeast just consumes the sugars, what's going to happen when you want to bake it? This is a tricky one. I mean, if you can understand this, then I mean, you're pretty much in
Well,
capsulated
as the
baking.
yeast is like just consuming, it's producing all the different like alcohol and carbon. So you've got like this really airy, gassy product.
Yeah. And then what happens to the sugars? Eventually, is it going to run out or not? I mean, is it unlimited sources of sugar
No,
in flour?
I'm sure eventually.
It's going to run out, right? And then what is our product going to look like when it runs out? Do you guys know?
Will it be pale?
Do you understand why that might be the case, guys? That is it right
Because
there.
it took all the sugar.
That's it. There's no sugars. There's no caramelization available, right? So that's one issue with the lack of salt. Yeah. What else does salt do? We said it tightens flavor. What else does salt do?
Regulates enzyme activity.
Right. Absolutely. So it controls that fermentation process, so we can sort of keep everything in check. All right. What else? We talked about hydration a little bit, right? Do you guys remember the first thing that we did? We mixed some ingredients. It was just water and flour. We did 4 different batches. I know it was so long ago, I barely remember it, but do you remember the different feel of what something felt like at 50, 60, 70, I think it was 75% hydration?
Yeah.
What starts to happen as it changes?
They go from being really tight feeling to like tacky and like some of them are even like
Hard to control, right?
sticky.
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, can you guys remember that? I know it's a long time ago.
No,
All right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Those 3 bowls.
All right, so those were the main components that we sort of addressed in lecture 1. We sort of ran through the basic ingredients and we sort of looked at how they reacted with each other, right? So then we went into the week of chaos, right? When we sort of made a lot of bagels and didn't have much time to reflect on what we were doing. But if we look at the pictures, I just changed a couple of subtleties in it just to see if it would affect the flavor profile. So if we go to this page right here, this is where we're also going to start taking notes on as we go through the flavor analysis afterwards. So the control factor really felt to me like a bagel ought to. It was everything that I expect. It had a certain extensibility factor. Do you guys remember what I did? I showed you 2 components in regards to, I called it extensibility. And what other thing? There was one other component in there. There's a little picture of it.
Elasticity.
Elasticity, absolutely. So if you look at those pictures, right? Do you remember how that dough felt like? I did one that was cold fermented and one that was mixed that day. Was one of them tighter? Was one of them more extensible? Do you remember which one?